Okay, Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, monthly budget report.
Good morning, Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Scott Jones. This is the monthly budget report. It's a requirement of USBE staff to inform the Board of Education on the fiscal responsibility of the board and of the staff, and then also the status of funds and whether or not we're effectively controlling and managing those funds. I will say that the USBE is solvent. It's able to meet all of its obligations. Last month, I did bring up some concerns or details surrounding the private and homeschool student statewide online education program. We're going to be working on the rule tomorrow in Finance Committee. We'll provide additional details on the course of the funding for the remainder of this year and potentially what direction we're headed for next school year 2021, as part of the rulemaking, if you will, or that process in Finance Committee tomorrow. Other than that, the report is at your is available to you in the backups. It's also available to the public. You have drill down capabilities, so to speak, within any one of the sections of the Utah State Board of Education across our entire enterprise. Subject to any questions or concerns with any of these sections or the report, which is effective as of the end of October or October 31st. This concludes the monthly budget report.
Any questions or comments from board members on the monthly budget report? Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Scott, as I was looking this over, I didn't really see anybody anywhere, but do we have any departments that are exceeding where they should be at this time with their budgets?
No, other than it's always a concern, other than with the SOEP situation going
okay.
on right now, there's no other incidents of even approaching where we would
That's what it
consider
looked
that
like.
to.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
We're fine, and that SOEP situation is a lot to do with systems, communication issues, things like that we're on top of, and we'll address those further by way of the rule tomorrow, the discussion in Finance Committee, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments on the budget.
Okay. With that then, Chair, if I may proceed to the discretionary funds report.
Please do.
Is orientation for the board members, and I know I do this every time, but it's important that we start in the upper right-hand corner. We start out with beginning balances, and then as we progress and identify particular board-approved projects, we systematically, if you will, apply the funding allowably and appropriately to those projects. We've taken the course of highlighting, which you can identify from the last meeting, in yellow, those items or projects, if you will, that were approved by the board in those amounts, with the most recent being for a particular amount of funding set aside, if you will, or encumbered for the purpose of recruiting for hard-to-fill positions. So I'll just inject this at this point. We are really having a challenging time due to the increases in funding to local education agencies with recruiting for particular hard-to-fill positions. We're in the process of working diligently with HR to do analysis and study, especially along the lines of the two positions, educational coordinators and educational specialists, so that we can inform you and subsequently, or hopefully through you, the legislature on what we would need to even start to close the gap now in our ability to recruit and then also retain, where we tend to lose just some high-quality individuals to higher paying positions within the LEAs. That's really resulted in the last maybe 1 or 2 years, from the increases in salaries or availability of salaries to those particular individuals. This doesn't mean we do continue to, as the superintendent said, expertly acquire expertise out there, and we're grateful, as you all saw, for all the individuals that are willing to come and work here and do great things for the individual students. However, and it's a lot of factors here, the current state of the economy, the raises on it too, that we are having some difficult times with particular positions and getting them filled. So that resulted in our request to set aside some funding or encumber some funding towards professional recruiting services if needed, so that we can have that additional help in identifying and getting qualified personnel here. Then the other one was the $25,000 that was approved by the board for and I don't have all of the details on this, but we will have details because my understanding is Board Member Earl's been working with Chief of Staff Stanley and Sarah Young as well to move forward with, basically a promotional campaign on just how great it is and how awesome it is to be an educator here in the state of Utah, and all of the great things that current educators are providing and what future educators will as well. So we feel really good about that. We feel really great about all of them, of course. This is really a great opportunity just to really get out there and just show what great things we're doing, or well, the educators are doing. And, hopefully that'll be a way of ensuring that we have just more and more fantastic personnel coming through the system, if you will. The throughput of educators through the higher education, University of Utah, all of those too. So thank you for that. Any questions
Yeah,
or
we have-
concerns about
well, we
the
have a
discretionary
question.
funds report? I probably went on too
Board
long.
Member Lear?
Can I ask a question to Deputy Superintendent Scott? I wonder if you are and if this is simplistic, and of course we are, Carol, you can say so, but I've had some conversations with employees in other state agencies that have said the same thing.
Yeah.
And what you're saying now about especially the coordinator positions reflects what I'm hearing, that the salaries are comparable until about, 7 or 8 years in, where then there becomes a great disparity.
Yeah.
And that may be a little bit different from different agencies, but I'm wondering if you're working with other state agencies, because I think what we need is a significant bump in state agency employee salaries.
Sure, yeah. So the answer is yes. We are working with other state agencies, not directly though. HR, as you know, we have support from DHRM. So as part of this process, they do a really good job of looking at, educational coordinators are unique to us, to this
Right.
agency, right? So they did, as part of their analysis, they also looked at comparables, my understanding to comparables in other state agencies. More so, though, the analytics will come from comparisons of like positions in LEAs. And that's been a process that Deputy Superintendent Norman is on, and as myself, from the fiduciary side or from the financial side. So yes, the answer is yes. We are doing that. Because it's true, not just in the educational coordinators, we also have like positions titled IT analyst, right? So then comparing that with the other agencies, we've done that in the past too. And if you recall, the board did actually work to, or use the funding to close that gap when we were experiencing the inability to do that. So we'll further develop this and come back to you with some solid recommendations and some great data on what we need to do going forward and ahead of the legislative session.
Just to follow up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I just would really recommend that you work with, like, for instance, the AG's office, because
Okay.
that is another state agency, and I know it seems like we're hiring more and more attorneys, but that's just one example of an agency that's finding at 7 or 8 years that
Okay.
their trained employees are going to other our version of LEAs, where they can make more money. And it
Right.
is, to me, it seems so counterintuitive that the state level people who are supposed to be making policy for the locals are underpaid compared to those in the local
Yeah,
trenches, so.
I think
Thank
Chair,
you.
if I may, I think you'd see agreement with that too, with Board
Yes.
Member Lear's assessment, and we will do that. We'll proceed accordingly.
Do we have any other questions or comments on this portion of Deputy Superintendent Jones's report?
That concludes the report then, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.